First of all, I must say that it is a great privilege to be in Singapore. I am a great admirer of your country. There is so much the rest of the world can learn from you people. Second, I am also honored to be sharing this platform with Jean-Pascal. Schneider Electric has been a customer of ours, and therefore I consider it a big honor to share this platform with him. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak here. Mahatma Gandhi and Lee Kuan Yew have been my heroes. Mahatma taught us the power of leadership by example and the power of non-violence. The founder of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, transformed Singapore from a once colonized third world country to be a leader today in prosperity amongst the first world countries. Infosys is a 42-year-old software consulting company. We operate in about 90 countries. Today we have a revenue of $18 billion US and a market capitalization of about $65-70 billion. I don't know the exact figure. I will speak about my own experiences in handling uncertainties in a microeconomic environment, not the macroeconomic environment, which you all heard yesterday. Intel's Andrew Grove often said that a successful company always operates with a healthy sense of paranoia. I agree with him fully. We at Infosys realized that creating a mindset to act always as if we are in tough times was the best way to handle tough times when they indeed occurred. We also worked hard to prepare an organizational mindset of doing everything necessary to achieve aspirational targets, but being prepared for the worst. I also realized that a leader's first responsibility is to foster a culture of being nimble or agile and embracing excellence in thought and in action. The janitor to the chairman in a company must live agility and excellence. That must become a part of every function in the organization that interfaces with every stakeholder: customers, employees, investors, vendor partners, government of the land, and the society, most importantly, the society. I have found that this culture is easier to develop during good times rather than during uncertain times. What do I mean by uncertain times? It is when the probability of achieving important microeconomic parameters like the targeted revenue, targeted net income, or net profit as it's called perhaps in this country, handling the loss of key markets, key customers, key investors, and the attrition of key employees is higher than normal. While the opposite could also be true, when we speak of uncertainty, That situation, as we will all agree, is a positive outcome, and we generally do not worry about it. What are the things a leader can do when faced with such tough situations? As I said earlier, the best model of leadership is to run the company as if we are in uncertain times. How do we do it? We at Infosys created a risk identification and mitigation council. The council identified 129 risks, including macro and microeconomic risks, technology risks, geopolitical risks, competition risks, supplier risks, and risks in the market, talent, finance, and of course, most importantly, company reputation. Risks also arise, as you people know very well, from depending too much on one market, one region, one customer, one technology, one key investor, one key employee, and one key supplier. We started working on risk mitigation and tools for each of these risks, the 129 risks that I spoke about. In 1989, I asked my friend, late Rahul Bajaj, to recommend me a management guru. We were a new company, just 8-year-old, very small. He said that the best management guru is nothing but market competition. He told me that the best way to enhance market share is to create a clearly differentiated and not so easily beatable business value to our stakeholders vis-a-vis our competitors. He advised me to observe the competition carefully, learn new ideas from the competition, implement those better with a sense of alacrity, and where possible, to improve upon those ideas to create our own next practices. That's when I realized that continuous innovation is the best medicine, and that innovation must become organic in our company. Innovation has proved to be, my friends, the best antidote to fight unpleasant surprises at Infosys. To foster innovation, I have realized that an organization must create an environment of openness to new ideas, focus on youth, meritocracy, fairness, transparency, accountability, teamwork, pluralism, sharing credit for success with other team members, speed, imagination, daring to experiment with new ideas without a fear of failure, disagreeing without being disagreeable, and excellence in execution. I also believe that the responsibility to usher in innovation cannot be limited to any one function or a set of specialists in the company. Everybody, at every level, in every function in the organization, must be trained to ask 3 fundamental questions in what they do every day. And those questions are, 1, how do I do what I am doing today faster tomorrow? 2nd, How do I do what I am doing today cheaper tomorrow? Third, how do I do what I am doing today with a better quality tomorrow? Generally, I have found that the administration function in an organization is adept at raising objections to new initiatives and consequently delaying the progress. Mr. Mohandas Pai, the head of finance and administration at Infosys during my time, solved this problem by recasting the role of the administrative staff to operate as business enablers rather than as gatekeepers. He made our administrative staff own bottom line responsibility for finding solutions to the problems of our revenue earner functions rather than operating as rulebook throwers. He brought a management orientation to every task in the company and made sure that they were run as projects. He provided full transparency to the target date for completion, to the resources so far used, to the percentage of tasks completed so far, to the resources so far used, and to the outcomes already achieved. After all, you know better than I do that management is about achieving the desired objective on time, within the budgeted cost, and exceeding the expected quality. Every strategic decision at Infosys was discussed in a committee with at least 35% members being employees aged below 30 years. I did it because my view was that these youngsters would serve longer in the company than me and would be affected much more by these strategic decisions than older people like me. We also ensured that the hierarchy of ideas prevailed rather than the hierarchy of corner offices and titles. Such an exercise introduced a newfound confidence and hope in our youngsters and brought fresh and out-of-the-box ideas. We reserved a day every year called the Ideation Day, where only people below 30 years and with new ideas made presentations on their new ideas to make our company faster, to provide better quality services and products, and to provide more value for money to our stakeholders. The senior people in the organization were the audience, and they had to take down notes. The best ideas in each function were awarded prizes and went into a detailed evaluation mode and were implemented company-wide if they were found useful. My colleague Chris Gopalakrishnan created a knowledge database where new ideas, experiences, expertise, skills, problems, and solutions encountered for the first time by an employee of every function in the company were documented digitally in a format for key-based searches so that our employees spread all over the world did not have to reinvent the wheel. Both the authors and the users of such knowledge nuggets on this database were awarded knowledge currencies whenever an employee used any of the knowledge nuggets. They were converted to actual cash by these employees at the end of the year. Thus, more times an idea was used, more money did the author of that idea make. More ideas an employee used in the database and improved his or her and company's productivity or innovation, more money he or she made. Many of these nuggets were included in the process checklists that were used in the future by line functions and business enabler functions to improve our work productivity and our innovation. Wherever possible, customers who had good ideas in improving the services or products of our company were involved at every stage to give suggestions and to provide feedback to us. This idea, many of you know, was invented by late Professor C.K. Prahalad and Professor Venkat Ramaswamy of the University of Michigan. It is called co-creation. I realized during the internet bust of 1999-2000 that the best way to obtain a higher market share was to provide better value for money to our stakeholders. Economists say price is what you pay and value is what you expect. Therefore, our task was to increase the value delivered per $1 of the US, or to increase what I termed business value leverage. Mathematical models were produced by our R&D people for business value estimation provided by us to our stakeholders in every domain. Our salespeople were trained to communicate the business value provided to our prospects in prospects' own language rather than using some technology mumbo-jumbo. We realized that good margins come from reduced costs without reducing value to the customer. My mother used to say that we must live like saints, think like scholars, and act like warriors. So, austerity, deep thinking, and speed and daring became our norm. I also realized that Mahatma Gandhi's principle of leadership by example is the best way to create trust in our policies and rules at Infosys. I traveled by economy on international flights until we reached a revenue of $1 billion US and a net income of $280 million US. That is 28% profit after tax. Then, of course, we had to change this since our younger employees wanted better comforts for themselves. Even today, I always take a bus from Narita Airport to my hotel in Tokyo. We classified every cost into direct and indirect costs and fixed and variable costs. Direct costs, as you people know very well, contribute directly to the revenue earned. Similarly, variable costs are incurred only when you earn revenue. So we converted as much of fixed costs to variable costs, and we had a program to reduce indirect costs as much as possible. For example, we made the fixed part of the compensation low at Infosys, but the variable part was made pretty high and was based purely on performance. In the end, intelligent, hardworking, strategic thinking, and value-based employees got higher compensation at Infosys compared to any other competitor of ours. We also distributed 20% of the outstanding equity as employee stock options to the high-performing employees at every level, from the best janitor to the best president. Today, it is worth about $14 billion. At its best, it was about $20 billion. So employees had a sense of ownership and an incentive to raise revenues, reduce costs, and improve earnings per share. Well, the biggest lesson, my friends, I have learned in my corporate journey is that leadership by example is the best way to introduce the cultural change needed to become a value-based, dynamic, innovative, cost-conscious, market-oriented, and profitable company focused on stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning to all of you. It's a great privilege to be able to speak at this forum in Singapore. I feel really honored. I feel really also honored to be on a panel with you. You are a legend in the IT industry. And I discovered in the waiting lounge that you speak perfect French. So we could have had that panel in French. I'm not sure it would have been very popular. So in exchange, I propose you my presentation in English, but with a strong French accent, right? With that, I'm going to speak about the same topic, but I'm going to try to take a different angle. And I'm going to speak about one subject of maximum challenges and uncertainty, which is the field of energy. And I'll speak about it because you can speak about local challenges, but energy is a global challenge. And the only way to resolve it is to work across the borders on this topic. And you're going to discover, hopefully, that this subject is actually intertwined with the subject of digitization. And actually, digitization is probably our best choice or our best shot to try to resolve the big energy conundrum that we are facing. So everybody in this room knows Infosys, of course, but most of you don't know Schneider Electric. So I'm going to start by a quick idea of the company. And I'll try to use the example of our company to show how much we are facing a major revolution, a necessary revolution in the field of energy, and how much it creates opportunities on one side, and on the other side, the need to transform and the need to revolution. So Schneider, in 2 words, 34 billion euros of revenue. We are a supplier of technology. You don't know us, but we are in most of your homes, in most of your buildings, in most of your cities. We power most of the clicks that you do on the internet, on most of the IT industry. We are in most of your manufacturing factories, and it's good that you don't know us because our job is to support your success and your progress in sustainability and efficiency. And if you look at what we've become over the past 20 years, the company was created in 1836. So I'm not the founder of the company, as you can imagine. It was created more than 180 years ago, but we reinvented completely the company in the past 20 years, changed the size, multiplied by 4, changed the market cap, multiplied by 10, and repositioned completely the company. 20 years ago, we were doing electrical products. What we do today is 70% of what we sell are solutions for sustainability and efficiency for our customers. We bring you a path to net zero. 50% of what we do, roughly, is digital, which means electrical combines with digital for more efficiency. And one of the key markers of Schneider is that we were convinced from the beginning that the pivot to a new model would happen to the Barry Center, the center of gravity of urbanization, manufacturing, digitization, and therefore we focus our efforts on Asia. And Asia today is at par with North America as the biggest region for our company. So more than 40% of what we do is happening in new economies, and 30% is happening in Asia. So this is what we are trying to resolve. And this is probably the biggest challenge of our generation. Number one, energy is at the core of two major issues for humanity. Progress, on one side, and sustainability for our planet. If you look at progress, the passport to a decent life for anybody on Earth is energy. I think people who were born in poor places remember the time when electricity or energy arrived in the village or at their home. That's the path to education, that's the path to emancipation, that's the path for a new life. On the other side, energy is absolutely at the core of the problem of climate change. 80% of climate change is coming from the way we consume and we produce energy. So now back to the challenge that we face together. We need to bring energy to 3 more billion people on Earth in the next 30 years. 1 billion of the people today on Earth don't have a correct access to energy. 2 more billion people will be born on Earth in the next coming 30 years. On the other side, the model that we have for energy is completely unsustainable. You see that red curve up, that is what we are facing in terms of emissions with the present model, right? That goes to 4 to 5% of degrees of increase of temperature on Earth. We need, if we want to be back to 1.5 to 2 degrees, to bring it to the green curve that you see here, which is a noticeable decrease of carbon emissions in front of the need for energy, which is going to happen in the next coming years. That means we need to reinvent the model in around 3 major priorities. The first one is decarbonize the fossil fuel industry, because it's still an important part of the model. The second thing, be prepared to a world that's going to be massively more electrical. Today, only 20% of energy consumption of the world is done under the form of electricity, while 30 years from now, it's going to be 40 to 60%. So it's going to be 2 times to 3 times more electricity. Of course, the fashionable part of it is the car industry, because we all love cars. But everything will be more electrical. Buildings, industries, manufacturing, everything will move to electricity. A large part of what we face will move to that. And finally, the biggest contributor of reconciling progress on sustainability for all is energy efficiency and circularity. This is the only way to bring energy to 3 billion people and bring that curve of climate change to the right level. And there is one thing, when we speak normally about energy with journalists, the politics, and industry, 90% of the debate goes to supply. It's going to be nuclear, not nuclear, renewable, not renewable, and so on. But in the history of humanity, energy transition never happens through supply. They happen through demand. Cars will not be electric because there is more electricity. There is actually not more electricity. They will be electric because somebody designed a car electric, which is better performing, which is more comfortable, and which is more attractive for the public. So our challenge for energy transition is first and above all to transition the demand. So things are happening. We were in a world that was taking the model of energy for granted, and I would say in the past 5 years there has been major changes in the opinion and in the way people look at things. COVID has pushed digitization to a new level. Energy crisis has pushed electrification and the need for electricity to a new level. Climate change and the global awareness of climate change has made that now more than 4,000 very large companies, the largest companies on Earth, have taken big commitments in terms of carbon neutrality. And geopolitics have made that there is a lot of investment going into reshoring, which allows actually to redesign a part of industrial setup in a more sustainable manner. The only good news in all this is that we have a massive problem that we have to deal with, but at the same time, 2 technologies are emerging which are making a different thinking of energy possible. The first one, I spoke about it, is electrification. And electrification is not the same electricity as the past century. It's based on renewable, it's decarbonized, it uses storage, it's a very different sort of electrification. The second one is digital. And take the episode 1 of the internet and digital. It was the internet of people. And it changed everything, the way we hail a cab, the way we meet, the way we work, the way we do everything. The episode 2 has barely started, and it's about the Internet of Things. And it connects us to our environment, to the machines around us, to buildings, and it connects machines to machines, and it allows for much higher level of efficiency and optimization. And I've not even cited here the big thing that comes once you have digitized, which is artificial intelligence. Because artificial intelligence brings that possibility of optimization and efficiency to a completely different level. So speak about that combination of those technologies, which are not technologies of the future, they are existing technologies. Digital for higher level of efficiency and circularity, electrification, clean electrification for decarbonization, and you have in sight a world which is far more sustainable. And one thing I would like to insist, when there again people speak about energy, they tend to speak about Horizon 3, Horizon 4 technologies. But today, we can eliminate 70% of carbon emissions due to energy with existing technologies produced at scale and produced at the right level. Narayana was saying it before, it's about always doing faster and doing cheaper, and this is what we need to do. But it goes with a different way of thinking, a different way of building, and a different way of operating things. We have, at the end of the day, very different situations in the world. But if we simplify, I would say two situations. The first priority in the already developed and built world is accelerate the retrofit, go faster. I'm going to take the example of Europe. In Europe, 75% of the buildings are inefficient. Today, Europe retrofits a maximum of 0.5% buildings a year. If we want buildings to be all net zero, Europe will be net zero in 150 years. With respect to my life expectancy, is not satisfactory. So what we need to do is leverage new technologies to go 6 times faster so that we reduce that to 20 or 30 years. The second case is developing economies, emerging economies. And I'm just going to focus on India and Africa by 2050. Those two large parts of the world will see an increase of more than 1 billion people in population, and they will build as many new buildings as there is today in the combine of Europe and China. Think about it, the impact on the carbon footprint of the world. So there the priority is very different, is to build as close to net zero as possible, the new, and not retrofit, right? It's about building right from the beginning. And I realize, go faster, go cheaper, that we need to do it with technologies which make it affordable for the fast emerging countries. So we face all together a big challenge, but the biggest disruptor for the world of energy is in fact digitization. And this is where I joined Infosys on Narayana's speech, that technologies combine together to offer solutions that nobody had thought about before. When you face uncertainty, it's time to open really everything and to try to find the right partners to solve problems in a different manner. But without going into detail, for the first time, as everything is getting connected around us, your car, your building, your home, and everything, you can have combined everything which is energy and automation for better efficiency. Every object has its digital twin on the cloud. We can have one digital twin from the time you build, from the time you design, to the time you build, to the time you operate, and you eliminate 30% of waste and losses, which are happening today in every sort of construction. You can go in managing your company not the usual way or the traditional way, building by building, plant by plant, but you can have one repository and one digital twin of your whole company. And then once you've got all of that data, you can use AI to get supplying the cheapest and the greenest possible energy. We are today able to make net zero buildings. We just have to rethink the way we design them, and we have to put digital at the core of them. So Let's make some example. I'm going to scroll very fast. These are concrete examples. Those integration apply to a building. You can get to 30% energy efficiency. You can reduce carbon emissions by 90%. You can have all your parameters on the screen with a cost which is marginally more elevated than a traditional building. Same thing in plants, same thing in data centers. Think about data centers. They are moving to Gen AI with GPUs. One of the key challenges there is to supply enough energy for that accelerated computing capability which is coming forward. And then, of course, cities that we all share, but we share inefficiently, can be all optimized if water networks, transportation networks, grids, and all the mission-critical networks are optimized and accessible to the citizen. When we look at this challenge of being collectively more efficient, and it was said before, is about partnership. It's about co-creation. It's about working together. And if you look at Schneider, we've committed to be carbon neutral by 2030, and on our full scope, including suppliers and customers, to be carbon neutral by 2040. If we want to do that, the way we take it is by bringing everybody along. As we said, our employees, we take those very stringent commitments. We help our suppliers to cut their carbon emission by a factor of 2 in the next coming 3 years. We bring to our customers solutions to save 100 million tons of carbon, because otherwise we can't even make our commitments. And because we live within communities in emerging countries, over the past 10 years, we've brought electricity to 50 million people, green electricity, giving them the first access to energy, that passport to decent life that I was mentioning. And to do that, we've trained, and we are training as we speak, 1 million young people to those new technologies, because really being able to implement them is the only way to make the change real. And we've seen a massive influx of capital investment at Schneider to bring us the financial resources to make that operational. So as a conclusion, if I would have one conclusion, or more as an opening to the next part of the session, we are facing together probably the biggest challenge of our generation. We can solve it, but it's about connecting the dots that were not connected before, and working together as a team, ally our forces to make this revolution of the world not as a place where we do less. It's a place where we achieve more while using less of our resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first panel of Day 2 of the Asia Future Summit. Before we start the discussion proper, I'd like to give a brief introduction of the two gentlemen and the impact that they have made to their organizations and industries. So to the far right is Mr. Jean-Pascal Tricoire. He's the chairman of Schneider Electric. Before this, he had served for 20 years as both the CEO and COO of the company. Under Jean-Pascal's leadership, Schneider has transformed and become a tech company leading a software, sustainability, digitization, and clean electrification. As CEO, he redefined the company's purpose and tech portfolio, growing the company to 4 times its size, with revenues and footprint balanced across the globe. He is also instrumental in building AVEVA, a wholly owned company of Schneider, into one of the largest industrial software companies in the world. He is one of the pioneering business leaders to place big bets on Asian growth, as early as the 1990s, leading Schneider to have a presence in all major regions of Asia. And to my right is Mr. Narayana Murthy. He founded Infosys as a software company in 1981 with 6 other colleagues and just $250. And that was at a time when few thought India could give rise to multinationals due to the corruption and nepotism practices in the country. But Infosys has since evolved into one of India's biggest digital services and consulting firm. It was the first Indian company to list on the Nasdaq in 1999. Today, it employs more than 300,000 employees worldwide and reports $17.7 billion in annual revenue. He was described as a world-class entrepreneur by Mr. Lee Kuan Yew in his book, One Man's View of the World. So now usually for the first session of the day, the caffeine has not started to make its way into your bloodstream yet, and I, as the moderator, have to earn my keep. I will have to kickstart the first question just to get all of you warmed up. And I will ask an easy question. As we've heard yesterday, geopolitical tensions have heightened in recent years, and the conversations these days have pivoted from decoupling to de-risking. Basically, instead of demarcation, the discussion is centered on not putting all your eggs in one basket. And Mr. Murthy, just now you alluded in your presentation as well, there's a lot of risks to consider. This means reassessing your risks as well, or injecting new factors for risk consideration. So what are the new factors that global businesses must also take into consideration right now?
Well, thank you for this opportunity to participate in this panel discussion. As I often say, today the only constant is change. Everything is changing. Who thought about 5 years ago that artificial intelligence would play such an important role today? Similarly, whoever thought 3 years ago or 4 years ago that the relationship between US and China would come down to this level? Whoever thought that Britain would walk out of European Common Market? Whoever thought that India and Canada would have their relationship go down to such a low level? And if you look at the Fortune 500 list, it's very certain that almost every decade, the top 50 companies change rapidly. Therefore, we must accept that change is here to stay, that it is the role of the leaders of the organization to prepare their employees or their colleagues to handle this change. And handling the change requires us to become more open-minded, to learn from people who are better than us, to study new technologies, new geopolitical situations that are coming up, and parallelly think about how to handle these. And as you already pointed out, to have a portfolio of markets, technologies, etc., because that's what portfolio theory is all about, right? Minimization of risk. And that, to me, is the task of the leader. That is to make, as you have written here, make people nimble. Nimble in accepting new ideas, nimble in writing those new ideas, nimble in preparing the organization to benefit from those new ideas, because we don't know how long that idea will be the prime idea. How long it will continue to bring much revenues for you. And of course, Jean-Pascal spoke eloquently about the issue of sustainability. So I would say that the leaders of today must simply accept that change is here to stay in all areas of our operation and prepare their colleagues to welcome these ideas, learn to ride those ideas to their advantage, and also to give up those ideas if they see that those ideas are not going to be very useful. Let me stop here.
Right. Mr. Tricoire?
Yeah, so on the same topic, clearly what happened more recently in the world in terms of bifurcation is not great news for finding solutions to climate change. Digital bifurcation with different environments or technologies, green tech, should be shared at the global level, and that would make things faster, cheaper to deploy, as we said in both of our presentations. But it is a world as it is, and it is a choice by the people and the population to come back to something more bifurcated. Now, I completely agree that the key element is agility, on really being fast. I think fast beats big every day, on being close to the field, close to your customers, close to your people, makes the whole difference. I actually think that the only foundation for any society or company are people, and the only way to be agile, which is my obsession, is how do you empower your people wherever in the world so that it is every day their company. So we are facing a world which is much more multipolar, where things are more and more different according to our regions. So the way we responded to that is to have a managerial structure which is very unusual, with regions which are highly empowered on everything, from R&D to manufacturing to the whole ecosystem of suppliers to themselves, so that they can go very fast, even if they diverge, right? But they can be the fastest to move on the local specification. That means our teams are always local. You won't find a big center. We don't have any headquarters. We are spread out in the main geographies. And the objective is to make sure that everybody at Schneider can have an impact and can make fast decisions. And when I look at it, actually we've been working on that for the past 15 years, but that has prepared well for where we are today. Today, 90% of what we sell in China has been designed for China. 90% of what we do in India has been designed for India. That means we can deliver our customers much faster on up to their specification, with the right color, with the right this, with the right accessory. And finally, you know, for large companies like us, global companies, we have to be accepted by communities, by societies. And the fact that we work with local suppliers, on local integrators, on the local ecosystem, means that when we make $1, the ecosystem is probably making 3 or 4, which is making the whole thing much more acceptable and much more capable of innovating. So the whole thing, because everybody wants to be agile, but for me, the only thing is how do you make your people empowered, responsible, and accountable, and really motivated because they can make an impact. Therefore, the model of the time where everything was global is probably gone, because asking the authorization to big headquarters is far too slow for the world where we are today.
Okay, so it's basically being adaptable, being able to respond really fast, because you don't know where change is coming from and what change will happen. Anybody has questions? If not, I will do a second one. Oh, Professor Chan?
Thank you. I want to thank Mr. Murthy and Jean-Pascal Tricoire for 2 very inspiring talks. I'm not a business leader. This is a session for business leaders, but if I were ever to become a business leader, I want to be like you. My question, I'm a diplomat and an academic, so my question deals with the macro picture. I have a question for Mr. Murthy and one for Jean-Pascal. For Mr. Murthy, in terms of economic uncertainties, you mentioned that your dealings are with internal, how you deal with India. From us on the outside, we look at India and look at the big economies. You never mentioned the word protectionism, but for us, that is an important word. And big economies can afford to be protectionist. India, China, the United States today, and in our region, forgive me, Indonesia, if you are here, I think Indonesia is protectionist. Now, but your company, Mr. Murthy, sounds really very agile and you can compete with the world. So my question for you is, when do you see India reducing some of the walls, the attitudes of protectionism, right? And we would like you in RECEP. My question for Jean-Pascal is cost and sustainability. I think that's the main core of the issue for most countries. And with COVID and the investment required by COVID, many countries are now slowing down their agendas for sustainability. Can you deliver sustainability much cheaper than today, particularly for developing countries?
Mr. Murthy, you want to
Well,
go first?
thank you for that question. First of all, I'm not a leader in the macroeconomic area and in the trade policy of our government. So I will make an attempt to give my own perception of what's happening. Well, I think if you looked at where India was prior to the economic reforms of 1991, which is already 32 years, and where we are today, I think our imports are about, I think if I'm not wrong, about $700 billion, and our exports are somewhere around 500. So in other words, we have a current account deficit, or a trade deficit, not current account, trade deficit. So the country is already in a trade deficit. It imports a lot more than it exports. Number two, if you come to Infosys, you will see iPads imported, you will see laptops imported, you will see Bose speakers imported, you will see even chairs and tables imported from Malaysia. So I think every government will look at what the trade deficit is and then will start tightening it in certain areas. Now, look at, for example, one of the issues that Europe has been defending rather successfully is about protecting their farmers. US has been protecting their farmers. Try and argue with them. So I think these are inevitable, but your point is very valid. We have to open up even more. But then at the end of the day, we don't want to be in a situation where our trade deficit is so high that our rupee gets devalued even further. So there are wider macroeconomic issues that economic experts tell us that need to be looked at very carefully before they take those decisions, okay? Let me not go further. So, but your suggestion is a very good suggestion. It's a forward-looking suggestion. We should listen to voices like yours very carefully and adapt ourselves. But we're not in Singapore. We're not in China. China has a surplus, right? We are in trade deficit. Therefore, when you are in trade deficit, you will have to think very carefully before you take further action.
So, on my side, to your question, Ambassador Chen, I would start by saying that you want to be, if you would be in business, you want to be like us. Maybe we need to be like you, because in times of geopolitics, maybe all CEOs must be diplomats, actually. It's one of the qualities that we have to grow in our capabilities. But a few data points on your question. We have to rethink really sustainability on economics, on stop opposing them. When you go at the core of what we do with our customers, it's about chasing waste. And when you have energy prices which are through the roof and completely unpredictable, then your duty as a chief executive is to reduce risk and to reduce that exposure. You cannot, we are speaking about uncertainty, and we are talking, it's all about knowing your risk and trying to mitigate them. Energy risk is a major distortion in your global competitiveness. So dealing with your carbon on your energy is actually very good for your economics. I take the example of Schneider. We championed that cause for the past 20 years. We got 10% of energy reduction every 3 years. If I can operate my company on a much thinner cost, on thinner impact on energy, I'm much better than my competitors. So chasing waste, it's not only good for ecology, it's good for economy. Right? Then, to your second point is, what are the technologies for new economies or emerging economies? Actually, those technologies I'm talking about have changed completely the cost points on the return on investment of sustainability. You are speaking about 3 years return. And when you can take the scale of the country, I take my country of origin, trade imbalance has doubled in the past 2 years for only one reason: buying fossil fuels from the outside. If France can operate with much lesser fossil fuels, we've resolved a lot of our trade imbalance issue. That makes you more autonomous. That makes you more able to face difficulties and uncertainty. And what is true for France is true for any company, and it's true, I would say, for any household. If you can operate your home without paying that energy bill every month or reducing it, then you're in better shape to spend where you want to spend. So what we need to do is to have a better total cost of ownership picture of what we are doing, and say that if you invest that little bit more at the beginning, you're going to be saving everything in the next coming 3 years. It's like quitting smoking, right? Not only is it good for your health, but it's also very good for your purchasing power, and it saves you from addiction. This is what we're facing today. So on the third point, when you speak about carbon footprint, it's a global problem. And I would say the equation here, the duty of emerging and mature countries is to save. And if you save there 30, 50%, you create the space to share with new economies and new countries, with the people, the new cities that will be built in Africa in the next coming 20 and 30 years. And there is grown this double necessity to tackle the existing with retrofits and diminish the emissions, and at the same time make it possible with those new, affordable, and somewhere much cheaper technologies to build right from the beginning into the new places. I don't know if I answer your question.
Let me add just one point, Chen, if you don't mind. I'm not criticizing. As I told right in the beginning, I have tremendous admiration and respect for your country, Singapore, and I've learned a lot from. Now, Singapore had a policy earlier where people could buy real estate, and the stamp duty, if I'm not wrong, was just 8%.
No more.
Today, do you know what that stamp duty is for foreigners? Not for permanent residents, not for citizens. Can you tell me what it is? 60%. Now, do we say it is wrong? No, because what they found was, anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have a deep idea of these issues. What happened was, a lot of people started buying from outsiders. Therefore, the policy makers then said, no, we want the real estate to be bought by Singapore citizens and Singapore permanent residents. So therefore, while it is 8% still for permanent residents and citizens, I believe it is 60% for foreigners. Now, you can't blame Singapore for that. So therefore, I think we'll have to look at the situation, economic situation, the trade situation in each country, and then they will take appropriate policy decisions for a certain period. And once it comes under control, they will change it.
Next question. Gentleman at the back.
It's not working. Hello. Thank you very much. I'm Asad Latif from the Straits Times. A follow-up question for both gentlemen. What you've been talking about is very interesting because it shows the interaction between politics and economics and the environment overall. My question is this. One of the great hopes created by globalization was that economics would be in the driver's seat of global change. And that has happened. But now, because of decoupling and other issues that are very obvious to us, strategic conflict, do you think that politics is back in the driver's seat of global affairs? And if so, what is the future of business civilization? Thank you.
Well, I did it about 40 years ago. I defined globalization as the paradigm where you sourced capital from where it is cheapest. You sourced talent from where it is best available. You produced goods and services where it was most cost effective, and sold where the markets were without being constrained by national boundaries. This I did it in 83, 84. It looked very sexy then. Everybody was thrilled. But the result of that was globalization succeeds only when all the participants in that paradigm create or have strengths that are within a given band, economic strength or export strength, whatever it is. But if there are players who are economically weak, who are not good in exports, and they are put in the same basket as those who are very, very strong in economic strength and in exports, it doesn't work. And inevitably, action will have to be taken to protect the weaker. I mean, we all know what happened to Greece in European Common Market, right? So, I mean, there is no need to go further into it, but so therefore, my own belief is that globalization, even though it is facing some rough winds, thanks to nationalism in the US, nationalism in several other countries, but I think its advantages are still being appreciated, but it has slowed down because some players have not been able to take advantage of globalization as much as they wanted. But my own hope is that as those countries become stronger and stronger, I do believe that globalization will become even stronger because I believe in globalization.
Well, I share the optimism on globalization. I just think it's too complicated to even try to decouple things. When you look at value chains, and especially in technology, everything is deeply intertwined and everybody is dependent from others. Now, when you take the long view also, on a wider scope, it's obvious that globalization, if you take the global equation, has been really beneficial to all. On the top of doing incredible things like extracting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. Now, maybe the Frenchman in me speaking, I never ever thought that politics were in the backseat. It was always the natural institution with whom to work, with whom to speak, and with whom to build strategies. There may have been a time where people were thinking that they were transcending the world and going through the borders, but for anybody who's lived in different countries and who's traveled the world, you know that the culture is profoundly different and that people revert to their government to define their future. So I don't think there was any time when I was even thinking that there would be no border or kind of business that could do whatever they think. It's clear there is a pendulum at the moment where governments want to be more assertive, but frankly, is it very different from 30 years ago? I don't think so. On that dialogue, that with government is even more important today because we bring at a faster pace new technologies, new solutions, new ways of doing, and we need to be in sync with the society and community. So we work in every country and very locally with the government to work on those problems, which are problems we share. My final point is, when you look at the real big problems, they are all global, right? Climate change is global, pandemic is global, and it ruined our lives, all of our lives for a few years, and we need to work with them globally across the border.
Can we have the next question? Gentleman in front.
Hello. Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for the excellent presentations. Learned a lot from both the discussions. I have a question for both of the distinguished speakers. And my question is, what is your advice for CEOs who are building companies for the long term? I got a few points over here which I want to ask. One is, when you build organizations, there are certain principles, certain values, and certain core concepts which you had. Which of those are still relevant in these economic uncertain times? Mr. Murthy, I learned from you PSPD and how it became very important at Infosys. Does PSPD still relevant, or should we remove predictability? PSPD is predictable, sustainable, profitable, and de-risk. And that's what Mr. Murthy had set up at Infosys. So, but should we give up some of that flexibility and say that instead of being predictable, should we move much more faster and give up predictability? Instead of being focused on profitability, should we say that we make more investments in things like capturing a lot of data? Because data is the new oil for tomorrow. And if I get access to the data, if I control the data, then I can make more money in the future. Things like that. So there are a lot of changes which are happening. And I wanted to get your views in terms of which are the old values which we should still take forward, and which are the new ones which you'll advise for us and for both of you. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, about 30 years ago, I came out with an acronym called PSPD. I wanted my younger colleagues to understand the working of my company, of our company, and to take appropriate actions. The first P stands for predictability of revenues. I wanted my younger colleagues to look at better forecasting algorithms, to capture data from the trenches so that that's the real data that you're using to predict or forecast your revenues for the next quarter, 6 months, whatever year. We all know that as you move further and further, the probability reduces, right? The second part is S, sustainability of those predictions. That is, once the market department, who are primarily sitting in the office, they predict, saying that next quarter we will be selling this much. It is the responsibility of the salespeople to go to the field, to walk the roads, to meet prospects, communicate the differentiated business value that the company provides, make the sale. And then, once the salespeople have sold, it is the responsibility of the manufacturing people, or in our case, software development people, to produce the promised software on time, within budget, and deliver it on time, and raise invoices. That came under S, sustainability of the predictions. The second P was profitability. I've always believed that there is no point in doing business unless you can make money hand over fist. But as long as you do it legally and ethically, as long as you follow the principles of corporate governance, there is nothing wrong. Every corporation has to make as much money as it makes. So profitability, I used to tell my younger colleagues that it's very, very important. For that, you should control costs, you should provide better value for money, and sell at as high a premium as possible, etc. And the last one was D, de-risking, that I spoke about in my lecture. That is, you should not depend, you should identify all the risk parameters, collect data on them, and make sure that you have reduced the risk from each of those 129 parameters. Now, it has not changed. PSPD model was true 30 years ago, was true 20 years ago, 10 years ago, is true today, and will be true tomorrow. It is absolutely essential for every CEO to worry about PSPD. However, the parameters may have changed. The geopolitical risk may have changed. Technology risk may have changed, right? The growth of regions may have changed. But all those, the model has not changed. And as Jean-Pascal spoke about, the need of the day is sustainability. So that again, is about carbon reduction. It's also about water reduction, use of water reduction. For countries like India, we have only 1/4 the water that we need. Therefore, we have to be very, very concerned about water. So the parameters that come under PSPD may change, but the model has not changed. So therefore, I still stand by my PSPD model.
On my side, I can't answer to the values because I think values are pretty deep and they somewhere define your company. I personally have completely given up on predictability because I didn't see the COVID, I didn't see Russia, I didn't see the elections in many countries. So I've given up on that one. I blew up the budget at Schneider 15 years ago. Like you try to predict even 1 year in our business is probably insane. But you've got to be able to adapt to the reality all the time. But now, I would say the things which for me are really key when you steer a company these days, you never spend enough time on a laser-focused strategy, on aligning it with all the elements. For us, certainly, strategy on sustainability are like this, your mission, your values, all of this has to be really, really thoughtfully defined, right? And especially the place where you want to play in the value chain, because then you define the space for your partners, your co-creators, and that makes all the difference. The second probably point I would emphasize is you never spend enough time in choosing the people around you, because you can speak about your values and everything. At the end of the day, they are just the sum of every individual in your company. And people don't spend enough time, they spend a lot of time to micromanage people. They don't spend enough time in choosing the right people. If you have the right person, you don't even need to manage, because they will manage by themselves. So I spend personally a lot of time on people, but I never spend enough time on people. The third point is that you really, if you speak about agility and that kind of thing, you really have to be serious about it, which means delegating, empowering. That's the most difficult thing with big companies on human beings. They like to say, we empower people, they don't do it. So how do you do it deep into your system? How do you make it real so that people really feel empowered? You're not the one saying, I empower. People have to say, I'm responsible, and I take that responsibility. And the final thing, because we are really in the 21st century, spend a lot of time on technology. Because the worst for a company is to develop something which is already existing on the shelf and spend time on the things where you really create value. And most of the companies are kind of exhausting themselves in trying to redevelop things which are already existing. Technology used to be sort of, which means that it's really important to know your business. That would be my fifth. Sometimes people say, you've been 37 years at Schneider. That's very boring. That has been super exciting because I know the business better than anybody else, right? And when you want to digitize, when you want to bring value to your customers, it's really important you know in depth what you are doing. So choose people who are not only all great people, but also people who are very knowledgeable of what they do and passionate about what they do.
At this point, I would like to bring the discussion back to markets, maybe on Asia, since both of you have significant presence here. Mr. Tricoire, Schneider was one of the frontier European firms that pivoted to Asia before many others did. So today you have 4 hubs serving your markets, of which 2 are in Asia, one in China, and the other one is in India. Asia Pacific accounts for some 30% of Schneider's annual revenue, and of that, roughly half came from China. What's your own prognosis on the China economic outlook? Maybe let's start with 12 months first, and then next 3 to 5 years.
Look, there are certainly many more people in this room better able to speak about China economics than me. I can just speak as a company employing 28,000 people in China and operating 25 factories in China and having a lot of research and development in China. China is going through that transition of model, quality growth, shared prosperity, which has been decided by the government. That implies an economic transition, and we are going through that transition. And on the top of it, we exit from COVID, which has been a long period of isolation for China. I think we participate, we are patient, and we participate to the innovation. And China is also a great place, like India, for tons of innovation. Then we can speak about India, but I think somebody is much more qualified than me to speak about it.
Yes, Mr. Murthy, what's your take on China first and then India?
Well, I am a great admirer of China. Today, China has reached a per capita GDP of about $12,700, and India is still at $2,300. They started out on a very similar base. So China has done definitely a great job. There are a lot of things that one can learn from China. And even though perhaps there are, at the government level, at the border level, there may be some disagreements, but I do believe that, we have, Infosys has 4 centers in China. It is in Hangzhou, it is in Pudong, it is in Dalian, and in Beijing, I think. And we have definitely benefited from China. And I do believe that China, it's natural when you are at $18-19 trillion, there will always be some slowdown. So I don't think that is there's any structural issue. And insofar as India is concerned, I think we are growing reasonably well. The World Bank said yesterday that we would grow at 6.4% next year. And that's not bad today, though the base is somewhat lower compared to China. But there is a lot of confidence in the country. Everybody is enthusiastic. Everybody rallies behind the Prime Minister. Every week I see 50 entrepreneurs. It's unbelievable. Everybody has a new idea and they want to try it out. And so I think, I'm not that familiar with China because I haven't been there in the last 4 or 5 years, probably 5 years. But I do find there is a lot of confidence, lot of hope, lot of enthusiasm, and lot of activity in India. And I think that is very good. This is not the environment that existed in India 30 years ago. So therefore, I am very positive on India. And I believe that it is good for the world because these 2 countries, if they continue to grow economically, and if they learn to live in peace and harmony, I think it is good for Asia. Therefore, I hope it happens.
Let's have another question from the floor. The gentleman at the back. This row.
Hi, thank you. My name is Eng Kiet from Deloitte. So in professional services, and I'm focused on international taxation in particular. So I wanted to ask Mr. Murthy, earlier in one of your speeches, I think he made an inspiring remark like how you took economy until your business, the numbers hit a certain point. I think you also made reference to some parameters being made based on profit after tax, net profit after tax. So my question is, my first question, now that the world is gravitating towards this global minimum tax of 15% around the world, and which is going to be in place very soon by 2024, would some of the parameters or the thinking or the corporate thinking in making some of these decisions perhaps be based on a number that is actually before tax, net profit before tax, in the sense that the tax number in current climate is going to be less controllable, right? Since if it's going to gravitate towards 15%. My second question is probably to both panelists.
Sorry, I didn't understand your first question. If you can kindly ask in a simple sentence.
So the first question, would your business decisions be made less based on net profit after tax, but net profit before tax, since there is going to be gravitating towards a minimum tax of 15% going forward? Yeah. And the second question, earlier I think you made reference about perhaps as an individual you're unfazed by some 60% stamp duty in Singapore when purchasing properties. I would like to ask whether from a business standpoint, right, from Infosys, from Schneider, given this thing about 15% tax, historically Singapore has always had used tax incentives as an important lever towards attracting FDI. Going forward in this new environment, would the same optimism and support towards Singapore, remain as before, right, in light of this new environment? Thank you.
Well, coming to this issue of before tax, after tax, frankly, neither of these matters to me as much as the next parameter that I'm going to talk about. And I always articulated in my company that what every one of us should focus on is free cash flow generated per capita. This is, you know better than I do what free cash flow is. I don't want to give another lecture on free cash flow here because we hardly have any time. So therefore, I have encouraged my colleagues to think about free cash flows, which is after tax, after capital allocation, etc., dividends and all of that. So for me, that's what matters. Second, coming to the Singapore issue, my own personal feeling is, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think tax rate would matter. What matters is an extraordinary advantage Singapore provides. It is the best governed country in the world, in my opinion. The bureaucracy here is the best. And the hassle for people is the least. Therefore, my belief, certainly in my case I would say, is that I would come establish in Singapore because there are so many advantages. Even if Singapore were to become the highly taxed nation, I don't think it would matter that much because it has so many advantages.
I would add to that, you don't build a company on wheels, right? You don't build plants on wheels, you don't create teams on wheels with tax levels. So, of course, they may be part of the decision, but they come at a very secondary level. Respect to the potential of a market, the quality of the team, the quality of the ecosystem, suppliers, integrators that you can work with and create with. Back to Singapore, it's the decision to invest here, and Singapore is one of our real major hubs for high-level competency on more logistics in the world, is really based on the incredible quality of Singapore. And it starts with, of course, the openness and the efficiency of the society, quality of universities on training of people, the attractiveness because you can bring people on a project team here and people will be happy to come here, on the notion of clusters, the capacity to deal with the best industries in your enlarged industries into Singapore. So Singapore, and we are participating to many thought process, many think tanks, on many teams to keep working on it. But it's moving all the time. It's about maintaining or increasing the competitiveness. But the world is needing the places which are really open, really inclusive, really competitive in terms of work environment are not so many in the world. And we should develop it, and we should keep making it as unique, or even more unique than it is.
Thank you. Thanks for your assessment. I'm afraid we've come to the end of this panel discussion. I know there was one hand going up over there just now, but we are running over time. If you wish, you may want to take it off stage. Thanks, everyone. I shall not stop you from lunch. Thank you to Mr. Murthy as well as Mr. Tricoire. Thank you.